Welcome to the Personal Development Mastery Podcast. I'm Agi Keramidas and my mission is to inspire you to rise up, grow, stand out and take action towards the next level of your life. I interview leaders, influencers, entrepreneurs, authors, exceptional people who can and will inspire you to improve your life. Tune in for 2 episodes each week and make sure you subscribe to the podcast to get the episodes as soon as they are released. In today's show, it is my real pleasure to speak with 𝗁𝗲𝗄𝗆. Sarah, you are a transformational life and leadership coach with over 20 years experience in people management and leadership. You are a qualified NLP practitioner and an ICF accredited transformational life coach, and you are passionate about helping people connect with their joyful mind and create their joyful life. Sarah, welcome to Personal Development Mastery. It's a delight to speak with you today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Agi. It's brilliant to be here.
It's amazing. I know, Sarah, and I will quickly share how I met you, and that was through the Tony Robbins community. We were crewing at Tony Robbins event, and I know that you are in a quest of growth and personal mastery like I am. So I wanted to ask you, can you share maybe a key defining moment in this journey of yours?
Oh gosh, one?
Which one sticks out?
Well, let's just go off what you've just said. And I know you've got lots of Tony fans in your audience, but crewing UPW was pretty epic. I often say this to people, attending UPW was amazing, but crewing I think was even better. And there was just something about watching the transformation of people around you, but also having the excitement of knowing what was coming, you know, and how amazing an experience it was. And I remember my sister and I, we were at the end of the fire lane. And as you know, everyone gets invited to walk on hot coals as part of, I think it's day one, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And we were at the end of this fire lane and we were just able to watch the transformation on people's faces, you know, literally as they step onto the hot coals, walk across them and then reached us as that first anchor point. And it just blew me away, you know, the bravery and the vulnerability, the courage and the elation that people felt when they overcame their fear. So it was a real privilege to be there and to be able to do that. So that was I have a very fond memory around that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about when you first attended? Did you have a big moment there on your very, very first time? I'm asking that because for me that was when a very big shift happened that really steered my life to a completely different direction.
Yeah, we often talk about these big shifts, don't we? I think I'm more of a little by little shifts. You know, my personal development journey, well, you know, starting back in my early career. So I decided that I wanted to work in human resources as a job. And that was really around my interest in people. And so from that young age, I was already interested in emotional awareness, what made the difference between people who could show up and have a positive impact on people around them versus those that didn't. And that grew. And I think the point at which it became very personal for me was when I had my children. When I had my daughter, who's now 7, you know, I really decided that I wanted to create an environment for her where she could flourish. And I recognized that, you know, in order to do that, I perhaps needed to face some of my own demons, if you like, you know, my own limiting beliefs, my own inner critic, you know, the things that were holding me back in my life and the things that were, you know, preventing me from being, you know, that happy, contented, fulfilled person that I wanted to be. And that's really where it got personal. And it's just grown and grown from there. And it's sort of hard to pinpoint one particular point because everything builds on that. as a journey, I guess. But there have been, other significant challenges. After I had my son, Joey, who is now 5, I really struggled. There was a period of time when I had my daughter, she was 2. I had this newborn baby that wasn't sleeping. And I really struggled during that period. And then my personal development journey really shifted from how can I create this great environment for my kids to how can I manage, and my desire at that point was, how do I heal the things that I need to heal inside of me that means that I can be at peace irrespective of what's going on around me. So irrespective of the circumstances I'm in, how do I make sure I'm okay? And that was quite a difficult but amazing period of time of self-discovery and, really just setting that intention that this is the journey that I'm on.
And, you the way you described it, you mentioned that in order for you to change and create that life that you wanted to provide to your children, it was a matter of your own inner workings or starting the change within yourself. And I think that's something important for many to understand, that it's many times we look outside of us for the answers or the problems for that matter, whereas we have to turn our attention around. What do you think?
I completely agree. Yeah, there's only one way, and that's the inner work. The life that we experience is a direct result of the inner work that we've done. And that's true in life, in the workplace, in parenting, in relationships. The only thing we have control over is ourselves. And, if we constantly are, coming up with reasons over why something is a certain way, we're just giving the power away to circumstance. And it's when we start to change our inner world that our outside world changes.
Absolutely. And taking the responsibility, and I will use that word carefully, the responsibility for everything that is happening in our life, our present experience, whether we judge it as good or bad, it is our responsibility and our power. That's the great thing about responsibility, that if I'm responsible for it, I can change it. If it is someone else's responsibility and I get into the victim mode, then I don't really can do much about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know, the neuroscience around the fact that we see what we look for, so what we notice in our world around us just reinforces the beliefs that we have about the world. And also, it's in how we respond to those limiting beliefs and those judgments and assumptions. It's how we respond to them that can often create a self-fulfilling prophecy. We can end up creating the very thing that we're trying to avoid. So personal responsibility and personal leadership of self is so important.
Yes. Do you want to also mention about the words that we speak to ourselves? The importance of them, or your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, I mean, Tony talks a lot about this, doesn't he? The triad, focus and meaning and our physical state. But words are powerful. Yeah, words are really powerful because they attached to them is, meaning. It invokes a vision, it invokes an emotion in us. And, our words can make the difference between how we feel, So there was a study done, I think it was done by the Crown Prosecution Service or the police or something like this, around words they used to interview people who've observed a car crash.
Oh, yes.
Right. And what they found is they asked people to estimate the speed the car was traveling at. And based on whether or not they said before the bump or before the crash, they were asking the same witnesses, what do you think how fast do you think the car was traveling at? and they got 2 different answers just by changing that word bump or crash. And so it just goes to show how much it influences, our thoughts about things. So it's very powerful.
Certainly does. And you reminded me of, there is one situation like the car breaking down, and someone can use the words, this is devastating, or this is ruining my day, or this is a catastrophe. And someone would say, this is an inconvenience. So it's the same event, but the way that we describe it to ourselves and to others will ultimately define what our experience will be, because it's a different an experience of a catastrophe and an experience of an inconvenience. It's very different. And we choose.
We can choose, absolutely. And I think where I'm at now in the journey I've been on is about rising above it and observing that, So there's something about, honoring our experience and our emotions whilst not believing them, right? So we can observe ourselves being annoyed, if we've had a car accident or whatever, car breaking down. We can observe ourselves in that moment, feeling frustrated and feeling annoyed and maybe using the wrong words or whatever, but we can observe that and have compassion for it, but also not buy into it, right? And just know that it's part of our pattern. It's part of our human condition, isn't it, to respond in that way, and just to be, remain with presence to those feelings, because I think one of the things that can sometimes be a bit of a downside of the personal development world is this view that it's only about mindset, and it's and it has to be about being positive, and it has to be about constantly raising our standards. And I think there's a bit of a trap with that, where we can then end up resisting, some emotions that we might be experiencing, and that's not helpful either, So I guess there's a watch out, there's a bit of a health warning, I would say, just to make sure that we are being authentic and honest with ourselves, and sitting with discomfort and, maybe some self-judgment over how we might be handling a situation, and we can just observe it with compassion and kindness.
Yes, and it's important to understand also that there is this way, those ups and downs of our life or our emotional state, and to always want to be on the high, it's impossible, it's unrealistic, and yeah, I know what you mean, that sometimes personal development has been wrongly associated with something that is really not natural to humans. I mean, it's not, and the state of being it's one thing to be in a peak state, like Tony Robbins says. That doesn't mean that you are happy if something terrible is happening. It is exactly what you said, that you are able to observe your reaction, your emotional reaction, or even your thoughts, without necessarily being swept away by them and being carried to whatever direction they will take you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll change the subject a little bit. There was something I wanted to ask you. I was reading a blog post you had made about your passion, whether your passion is your mission.
Oh, yes.
So, and you were saying there that you were talking about our work and how our work impacts us, because it's very closely tied to our identity. So we have an identity associated with our work.
Yeah.
But many people find that their work is not their passion. So what are your thoughts how that affects someone's identity and someone's, whole disposition?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, anything that comes after the word I am is an identity statement. And so when someone says to you, what do you do? You'll say, I am a whatever it is you do. You don't say, I do this, right? So it does become part of our identity. And, we tend to find that as humans, what's important to us, what our values are, will lead us to a certain profession. We might have certain needs, that are met then by our work. If you're someone that's very passionate about being of service, you might go into the police or nursing or helping people in some way. If you're a problem solver, you might end up going into business and IT or whatever it is, right? And so I think that, it starts off with this kind of merging of our identity and our needs and our interests and our passions into the workplace, and we can get very identified with that. And we know that that's true when people, for example, finish service in the army, can really struggle to adjust to what that means when they have finished, or when someone's made redundant and they didn't anticipate that change, and suddenly they don't have that attachment with work. And I think that's true when people retire. So it has a huge impact on us. And we spend a lot of time at work, don't we? I think the thing around whether your mission is your passion, that was a question that Tony posed when I was crewing at UPW, and I was sat in the audience as a mic runner. And it was in that moment where I asked myself that question, because for me, HR had been my passion for a long time. I'd spent 20 years in HR roles in organizations. And I still feel very passionately about organizational culture and leadership, creating the right environment. I still feel very passionate about that. But I had realized that, do I really have this spark now? And is it time for a change? And that's what led me down the route to train to become a coach, get my NLP practitioner, and really start focusing around merging my passion for personal growth with what I actually do for a job as well. And, it's interesting, a lot of people I speak to, a lot of my clients come to me with these kinds of dilemmas. They feel at a crossroads, they're not quite sure what to do, they feel pushed and pulled in different directions. And there may be two competing parts of them that are in conflict about that decision, and money gets tied up into all of that as well, and some other beliefs that we might have about things. And really what I'm passionate about is helping people to create a life that they would choose, right? If you could get to choose your life, what would it be? And then how do you create that? What's stopping you from creating that? And really helping support people to find that authentic place that feels true to themselves and aligned with themselves. And sometimes it takes a wake-up call for us to really stop and reflect and evaluate that. I think the pandemic, for example, has been that wake-up call for some people. Yes, we've all been in massive change for the last year, but it's also made people go, is this really what I want to do? Is there something more? Is there more to life than this? Can I find more happiness doing something else? And I would encourage anyone to explore that if they're having those thoughts. Why not give yourself that, right? You get one go at this life. So why not make it count,
Yes, I remember that phrase that says that the eternity is not the hereafter. It's right here, right now.
Exactly.
If you don't get it here, you won't get it anywhere. And you said something about the wake-up call that COVID has been last year for many people, and I will add to that, I certainly hope so. Because I suppose some people have not really listened carefully, and they're still expecting that all this will end at some point and we will go back to how things were before. It's important, I think, to understand that things have changed forever, and there is a new direction that we're heading. I mean, collectively as human beings, and trying to hold on to what has been so far, I don't think will be serving the people who decide to. And that brings us back to change that we were saying earlier, that some people are very resistant to change, and they hold on. What's your number one advice on changing?
Well, as you were saying that, I was thinking about, I support organizations through change, and I did a lot of change management when I was in my HR roles, and I work now with organizations going through change. And the first thing you do is you get really clear on where are you going and where are you now, right? And we all seen the change curve, the 𝗵𝗵𝗄𝗯𝗵𝗲, grief, stages of grief that businesses have taken into a change curve. But you always know where you're going. You know what you're changing from and to. And I think what's happening in this pandemic is we know that we've changed, but we don't really know what we're changing to. And so it's a constant unknown. And I think that lack of certainty is incredibly difficult. So I guess what I would encourage, if someone was coming to me to talk about that, I would encourage them to start to really clarify what's important to them, So, how can you bring some of that certainty back into your, locus of control, right? So what is it that you want to see for yourself and your own life, your own relationships, your own health, whatever it might be, and focus on that, because we need an anchoring point. To know what it is we're changing. What's change? It's two endpoints, isn't it? The starting point and then, well, there is no end point, but we need to have a vision for where we're moving to.
A direction, yes.
A direction, yeah.
There is something else that I wanted to discuss with you, Sarah, and that's. I think that, and I was telling you earlier before we started recording, that lately I find myself more and more interested in the spiritual elements of, I will put it like this, the spiritual elements of personal development, if you want. So I know I'm just playing with the words right now.
Yeah.
But I wanted to discuss, because I know you are also on a spiritual journey, and I am as well. And these conversations, I think they are fascinating, especially, with people who are looking for something. And, sometimes you get an insight from conversations, and that is enough to steer you towards opening a book or doing something that will lead to a self-discovery.
Yeah, definitely. I think for a long time I've resisted this idea around spirituality. My personal development journey, was very much around the cognitive mindset side and the physical health side as well. And when I reflect back, I think, perhaps I had some blocks around, faith, and maybe some assumptions that I was making around how spirituality needed to include an element of religion. And I think that's probably what put me off for some time. I think also, there is a I think spiritual communities aren't always easy to access either. There's some language and, sometimes, strong beliefs, and you kind of think, well, how far out is this going to go, right? How woo is this going to get? So you sort of feel like once you step over that threshold, what's then going to happen? But I got to a point where I was becoming curious. I was just becoming curious about, right, I'm trying to make sense of all these things that I'm learning. I'm trying to put them all into a framework that I can access and use as a tool for myself and as a tool with others. And increasingly, it was just becoming more and more spiritual, because the different avenues I was starting to explore, really was around these ideas of oneness and presence with self, and disassociating with, previously I may have called it the human condition, but, I may also call it the personality or the ego. I would really encourage anyone who's sort of starting out down that route or curious to start exploring things, which just challenges that sense of who you are in your essence, in your spirit. And I have had experiences that have really challenged me in a good way, to realize, well, actually, we are all connected. And there is something separate than just the confines of the personality. And I've done that personally through training with Natural Success. So William White-Cloud, I've done a lot of his trainings. He's written a few books if people want to look him up. And also women's circles. So I've trained as a circle leader, and I now hold women's circles. And we do, in women's circle, it's about showing up as your authentic self. It's around, sharing your story, allowing that to be witnessed, without trying to fix, without trying to problem solve. There's no judgment or advice allowed. We're just sharing our stories and witnessing each other. And there's something really powerful when we do that. How often do we have those really authentic, honest conversations in life? And then we also go through guided meditation where we're seeking our intuition. And, the women by the end of the circle leave with an intention for the month ahead that they've found in their own intuition. And so for me, one of the things that's been important for me on my journey is bringing back my reference point to myself, right? So I've always placed a lot of importance on what other people think, and I would, I might have an opinion about something, but I would allow that to be overwritten by other people. I think parenting is probably the only thing that I felt incredibly strongly enough about that I wouldn't care what anyone said. I knew I was very internally referenced about that. But what I've been developing in myself is my intuition. How do I access my own guidance from my intuition that is anchored within myself? And that involves, having access to my spirit, to my essence, to who I am at my core and not who I am in my personality. And so I bring that into circle, and create that space for people to do the same in a very honest and authentic and supportive way. So anyway, I don't know if I've answered your question. I'm just, sharing. Has that answered your question?
It has. It was captivating. There are two things I will mention for what you said. One was you mentioned the word curious, and I really like this word. Being curious, I think, is the key to discovering new things and new things about ourselves, really, because that's the context on what we're saying.
Yeah.
And curiosity, I think it can transcend your beliefs, because as long as I'm curious about something, I might believe that it might be nothing, but I'm curious enough to research it, so it will go beyond. So I think it's important, especially things we are excited about, being curious.
Oh, the other thing I would mention as well that's had a big impact on me recently is the enneagram. So I'm training in the enneagram at the moment, which is kind of like some might call it a psychometric tool, but it's a tool to understand ourselves and our personalities and our drivers, our basic fears and basic desires. And there's different levels of health within each type. But it's a tool that's also used to access our spirit and our essence as well. So if your listeners haven't heard of the Enneagram, go and look it up, because there's a very affordable test you can do online to get your Enneagram type, and it's an incredible tool. And if anyone wants to talk more about that, just reach out to me.
Do you want to share a little bit more about that? Because I'm also interested, and also you could tell me, is there anything in specific that you have gained as an insight by you?
Yeah, so the Enneagram is based on the premise that the core wound that we experience as a child, so what we decide as a child in terms of our deepest core beliefs about ourselves and the world, that core wound, our personality is then built upon that wound. right? So there are 9 different types on the Enneagram, and each have different fears and desires. But it's all based on the fact that when we are very young, we become separate, right? We have a separate experience. And actually, when we're born as a baby, we don't know that we're separate. So we go through this process of separation. Actually, babies don't have a sense of self initially. They have to develop it, right? And whilst they're developing that, in order to do that, they form beliefs, or we all form beliefs about ourselves and the world, to try and make sense of these things. And our personality becomes built upon that. So we can then find, that our habits and patterns will all relate to that. So the Enneagram, provides 9 different types. It's quite a complex model, but I'll try and keep it simple for the explanation. And so each type, so for example, a 3 is someone who is a high achiever. Right. So their core wound and their core fear is the fear of not being good enough. Many of us can relate to that, right? But what happens is then to compensate for that core wound, they become a high achiever. So someone who's always striving for bigger and better things, more achievements, more qualifications, all of these sorts of things. And it's insatiable, right? Because nothing is ever going to satisfy it. It's a never-ending quest. Once you've achieved something, you just move the bar and keep going. For example, a number 2 is the helper, and their core wound is that they're not worthy, right? So their personality gets built on that wound, where they go about being a good person, and their way of being a good person is to help others, right? So number 8 is the challenger. So a number 8's core wound is around being powerless. And so a number 8 is someone who compensates by trying to gain power. And they do that by challenging others. They are often high achievers as well. There'll be...
I think, I think it's obvious. I think if you recognize where you are in that scale, or which that it gives you some insights about yourself, really, and some core beliefs. And we were saying earlier about changing that the first step is to realize, to understand, to acknowledge what the situation is.
Yes, and what's driving it underneath it, absolutely.
What did you get personally from it?
Oh my gosh. Well, personally, so I am a 6, which is a loyalist. And so a 6 is driven by the need for safety and security and trust. But also, on the Enneagram, this is where it gets slightly complicated, is that under stress, you drop down to a different number. And when you're healthy, you can go up to a different number. And for me, one of my core fears is the fear of not being good enough. And so a 6 drops to a number 3 under stress. And I recognize that, right? So if I start to feel like I'm losing a grip on something, I will push harder, I will work harder, I will do more, I will throw myself in. And I know to recognize those signs of, okay, there's a warning sign here. This is going into the unhealthy territory, right? It's not the action in and of itself. It's the relationship I have to that action. Yeah. So if I'm pushing harder, I know that, I'm going down the healthiness levels, right? And that is a warning sign to take a breath, take a moment, step back, observe the situation and start to refocus, how you want to tackle this. And then on the other side, the flip side is that a 6 goes to a 9, which is the peacemaker, which is all about harmony. And a 9's basic desire is to be unaffected by the world around them. And that has driven my personal development journey. That's really where my personal development journey got got going was around this desire to be unaffected by things around me and to have that internal peace. And so it was like, wow, this just makes so much sense. And I think what I really like about the Enneagram is it's about being able to relate to the fact that there's a personality that's driving these things. And it's not me, it doesn't need to be me, right? So who am I without those things? I am then my spirit, my essence, my heart. And that is different than how my personality feels it needs to respond to situations. And I think there's something so powerful from disassociating in that way, because then you can start to see, well, those are just the patterns and the habits. And I might get caught up in them. I might still have the feelings and the experience of them, but I don't need to buy into them anymore.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I have heard of the Enneagram before, but I've never really took the time to study it. So now you've given me the urge to do some research on my own. So that's brilliant. Sarah, I would like to also ask you some quick fire questions to start wrapping things up. So I always ask to begin with, what does personal development mean to you?
So to me, it's about growth. And there's a quote, and I forget now who said it, that we're all just walking each other home. And I feel like, particularly now with things moving into a more spiritual development journey, it's about walking home to my spirit, to my essence, and to that oneness. That's essentially the direction we're all headed in.
I'll ask you one hypothetical question. If you could go back in time and meet your 18-year-old self, what's the one piece of advice you would give the teenage Sarah?
Yeah, it would probably be not to take things too seriously, because everything's a big deal when you're 18. But also, I think there's something about, just knowing that everything's going to be okay. There's a great TEDx talk. What if everything's going to be okay? What if there's nothing wrong? And actually I think we can get so caught up, can't we? And there's a problem, there's something wrong. What if there isn't? What if it's all going to be okay?
It's a very interesting thought, and a very solid also piece of advice to, not to take life too seriously, I would say. Let's say you could wave a magic wand and change something in the world as it is today.
Oh, gosh.
What would you change?
Oh, that's a big one, isn't it? I think it would probably be around poverty and, access to decent living conditions. Oh, and there is climate change. Let me see. Can I have both of those? I just don't think that in this day and age there should be people living in the conditions that they are. Climate change, we all need to wake up, right? Because we're going to run out of time. So, I'm going to have those two.
It's your magic wand.
Can I choose more wishes?
Sarah, emerging from all this conversation we had, if you were to give to the listener one actionable item, something they can take away and implement in their lives straight away or tomorrow morning, what would you advise?
Oh gosh, because that's it's difficult to answer that one, because I guess it depends on where everyone is on their own. I know we keep using the word journey, but it's true. Where are you on your path? I guess perhaps that's the answer, is just to be honest with where are you on your path. And I think that sometimes even those of us who've done a lot of work can think, oh yeah, we've got it down now, we've got it sorted, we know our stuff. And I think that sometimes we can get a bit blind too, so we just perhaps get a bit cleverer about hiding our dysfunctions and stuff. But yeah, honesty, just be honest, where am I right now? Yeah, and sit with that.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Do you want to share a bit of what it is that you do at the moment, and how can people connect with you and find out more?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, so I offer life coaching, so one-to-one life coaching, and also leadership coaching. So if you're in an organization or want coaching around leadership skills, I do also offer organizations support going through change, whether that's leadership development or a change program of some kind. And then women's circles and retreats. I've got some retreats coming along down the line this year. So if anyone wants to find out more or get in touch, my website is 𝗤𝗎𝗄minds.co.uk.
Brilliant. Sarah, is there anything that you were hoping we would discuss today and we completely missed it?
No, I don't think so, Agi.
I'm asking you that because you were telling me that you wanted to, prepare. So I take it that you had thought about the conversation. So that's why I'm saying whether there was something that you really wanted to, share your thoughts about, and we didn't even touch it.
No, I think we have. We've covered everything, haven't we? Yeah. And if anyone wants to get in touch to speak more, I'd love connecting with like-minded people. So very happy to continue the conversation with anyone who would like to.
Awesome. I will put all the links in the show notes for the listener to find and connect with you easily. Sarah, I want to wish you all the very best. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for your time and your experience and expertise shared with us. All the very best with what you do in your life. Any last parting words?
Well, thanks for having me, Agi. It's lovely to be here, and thanks for sharing, your personal development passion with your listeners. I'm sure that it's brightening everyone's day. So thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and rate it on Apple Podcasts, and also share this episode with someone who you think will benefit from it. If you want to find out more about what I do and gain access to exclusive content, join my Facebook group Personal Development Mastery. The link is in the show notes, or you can simply type bit.ly/PDM group. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in.